back office service function has existed, to some extent will still exist. I think with cognitive computing it will increasingly be automated, so there'll be a lot less need for a strong or significant back office or outsourced function. I know even IBM's Global Process Services, which is the biggest HR outsourcing practice in the world, is going cognitive, right? We're increasingly using cognitive machines to do the work for our clients so that there's less cost attached to that. So I think principally you might have almost the Ulrich model, but instead of having a sort of a center of expertise in the same way, that would perhaps have less sway, and you'd have more of a center of analytics, which is defining under the advice and insight of what would have been your SMEs and your center of expertise. What's the next step that the analytics tell us we need to take?
Yeah. And I agree wholeheartedly. I think there'll be the rise of the almost data analyst, and that's going to be a new skill set. It's almost in comes the mathematician into the HR department, into the world of personnel, if you like. So I can see that coming clearly. But then the individuals who are interfacing with the business and taking some of that insight with them, or suggesting some of the solutions, also need to gain a skill set in understanding that technology, understanding how it be applied, and why the science is going to be correct. At the moment, you know, you look at some of the cognitive thinking sort of type programs, they look like a black box. It looks like a black art to some elements of HR, and we've got to move beyond that to a point of understanding about why this technology works, why it's going to be so powerful. I think the role of the SMEs and centres of excellence in HR will be also an interesting place, because they almost become a bit like the solution providers. So some of this, you know, some of their role will be automated. So an area of recruitment and resourcing, absolutely. There's lots that can be automated inside of that arena. But actually their role becomes one of looking at almost the setup and also in problem solving. We've just found a problem in our call centre operation. It looks like we're not bringing in the right people, right? Talent acquisition, can you go away and sort that problem for us, or take that data and find us a solution around that? So it will change the nature.
Yeah, and I think, you know, I think that there's this critical, I mean, you've alluded to this critical relationship between HR and other functions that are gathering and using data perhaps more effectively. I mean, you know, marketing seem to get away with spending a huge amount of money with a lot of freedom up front, assuming that they'll come back later and demonstrate the value that that's added. But as a result, they have really good analytics running on some really kind of unusual metrics for reaction and response and emotion and so on. Similarly, finance has got very rigorous rearview mirror reporting, but nevertheless, those functions are really good at that kind of analysis. So the opportunity is for HR to increasingly embrace specialists from that field. But what we find is, and it's very often the case, that we have HR people and analytics people, whether they were from whichever previous function, maybe even, often finance or other reporting functions, that come together and they just don't speak the same language. And this is where we're seeing that a new breed needs to kind of evolve, which is people who are people data savvy, who then learn to be analytical, or people who are analytics savvy that learn about people data. People data is not like other data. You know, in our teams in IBM, we specifically use psychologists for the vast majority of our HR metrics, because we need to keep a scientific perspective on what it's realistic to attribute to a human, and actually what metrics against humans are predictive of anything as opposed to just interesting to know. And if you don't isolate that, you could end up investing a lot of money and time in findings that really don't have much value to the business. They may seem interesting, but that's not to suggest that the insight will derive value. So this becomes a conversation about what platforms you use, because financial reporting is done on very different platforms from typical people analytics, which might be SPSS. You've got business reporters using Cognos. You've got others, HR, who are less confident, using the likes of IBM's Talent Insights platform. And even getting people to agree on what platform to use can be a huge journey for a business. So I think it's about picking the right fights in your own organization, that you start getting early wins, whilst recognizing you're going to navigate through all of these things eventually.